Welcome, everybody. We have with us today Derek Noltz. Hopefully, not Nofz. I'm not sure.
No.
uh, he is with Consumers Energy, and he will be speaking to us today about what's happening on consumer. Welcome, Crystal. Um, He's going to be talking on the clean energy plan. He's going to be talking about their renewable energy program. And then he's also going to be hopefully talking about EV charging incentives. And so this is Derek. He's part of the Customer Affairs Committee, something like Consumer Affairs Committee. But
Okay.
okay.
No problem. All right. Well, thanks everybody for having me. So yeah, Derek Nofz, and I handle what we call community affairs here in Southwest Michigan. So I'm based in Kalamazoo, and I, interface with community leaders, local government leaders, kind of the liaison to the company here for the local community, dealing with all sorts of issues. And also help with like our philanthropic side of the company as well. So we do a lot with our foundation, and we do a lot of support to like local organizations. So I also work on that. Let's see. Click through. Will we start? Okay. Everyone seeing the slides?
Yes.
Okay. So we've been around since 1886, 6.8 million residents we serve with gas and or electric. Interesting fact I always like to throw out about Kalamazoo. So the Kalamazoo metro area, if you will, is our largest combination area for our utility. So including gas and electric. You're up in Grand Rapids. You have our electric, but DTE gas. And if you're in areas of Detroit, you have DTE electric, but our gas. It's kind of strange how it's all carved up. But actually, this region is our largest combination territory. We're also one of the largest landowners and taxpayers in the state of Michigan. So our equipment is taxed, poles, wires, all that stuff. And so we are a big taxpayer as well. 8,800 employees, 96,000 miles of electric distribution line, and 28,000 miles of natural gas pipeline. So what I want to talk a little bit about, if you've not heard about, I will think by now most of you have probably heard about our clean energy plan. But basically, we're retiring all of our coal plants by 2025. And we are accelerating our renewable energy generation, and primarily that will be solar. We will do some wind. There are sort of select areas around the state where wind is good, but primarily that will be solar. We'll be building about 8,000 megawatts of solar, which depends. We usually tell people figure between 5 to 10 acres per megawatt when you're building out solar. So could be up to say 80,000 acres is what it would require basically to hit our plan, which goes out to 2040. And if you look here, I always like to show everybody this chart, kind of the mix today that we have. So you've got, right now we're at 31% natural gas and 19% coal. And then you can see that phase out over time to 2040, where we're at 63% renewables, about 15%. Again, and I'll talk about efficiency programs here in a minute. And then energy storage as well as natural gas. And storage is, so a couple of things. We are going to be building out a lot more battery storage, but we also have kind of the crown jewel of our generation fleet, I would say, is what we call our Ludington Pump Storage Facility. And we refer to that as the big battery, because if you think about it, it's kind of a battery. We pump water out of the lake up into a man-made lake, and then we let the water out, and we can control exactly how much water we let out. So we can control as we charge the battery and as we discharge the battery as well. So That's something we just actually made a major investment there. So we plan to continue to operate that facility for a long time. So again, I talked about 8,000 megawatts of solar. So right now we're in the midst of finding what we call utility scale projects. So these are projects capable of at least 100 megawatts, we say, for utility scale. So that's, if you remember, I said 6 to 10 acres per megawatt. So figure 600 acres to 1,000 acres, right, roughly, that we're looking for. We're looking for sites of that size. And again, to hit our goal, right, we don't necessarily want to build a megawatt here and a megawatt, we want to build these bigger projects to get us that much quicker to our goal. Like, it makes much more sense for us to try to find these large, utility scale type solar projects. And we have several in the works now. Now, the other thing is about 50% of that we will own, and about 50% of that we will purchase from private solar. So for instance, if you've driven east of Battle Creek and seen kind of by the casino there and up by like Turkeyville and Avenue, there's a very large project there. I believe it's over 1,000 acres. That's a private company, but we would buy the power from them once they build that facility. So again, the other thing we're looking at as we're looking for these sites is obviously open area. It doesn't make a lot of sense to cut trees down, right, to then put solar up. So some of it's going to be agriculture, some of it's going to be brownfields. We're looking for places where we already have transmission facilities. So our high voltage type lines, we're looking at areas that are adjacent, or at least, within a couple of miles of those, so that we then also don't have to spend a significant amount of money to run high voltage to the projects. So of course, we're looking for landowners who might be interested. Primarily we're leasing. In some cases we might be buying, but long-term 25-year type leases on this land. And of course, I'm also part of, again, I mentioned local government. So I've been working with many of the local government leaders in this area, to look at their zoning, to look at their rules in terms of solar. Some of them, solar is not even mentioned in their zoning. They may have updated it 10 or 15 years ago when wind was starting to be a big thing. And many of them have not necessarily updated it for solar. Some have, some are in the process right now. And so they're all taking a look at, where do we want these located in our township or in our area? And kind of what are the rules and zoning regulations around these sites. So that's something that I've been working on quite a bit over the past year or two here. And yeah, so the other thing I wanted to show everyone, let me see if I can, so yeah, here we go. So I put several links in the presentation, and I like to do this because I want to show you that you don't necessarily need this presentation to go find most of this info. It's all out there. It's all online. So again, I talked about solar. There's also customer generation. I think some folks here may be interested or may already be part of what we call like distributed generation or customer generation. That's like rooftop, type solar that you may put on your house. We also have renewable energy programs. So we still will be pushing this. And if you go back to that slide that kind of showed the graph of the programs over those 40 years, and it showed that chunk of energy efficiency, we have built in every year, we hope to get more and more and more efficient. And we have a lot of incentives and programs, smart thermostat. Anytime you're adding anything to your house, windows, HVAC, insulation. If you go online, you will find a huge list of rebates from us. So we're going to give you money back anytime you're going and making your home or business more efficient. And frankly, we kind of tell people, you know, before you go spending money on solar or those types of, you know, kind of larger dollar type of projects for your home, you can see a lot more immediate savings for a lot less money just going and making your home as efficient as possible. And we really push that as well. There's again more information there for distributed generation, generator interconnection as well. But then you can also find, you know, all sorts of info there on our different programs for, you know, rebates for making your home more efficient. Also, electric vehicles. We know we want to be a big part of that as electric vehicles become more and more prevalent. And the big thing from our end of that is the chargers. I think it was last year, the year before, we kind of pulled out a map of the state and we looked at some strategic areas. For instance, if you were driving from here to Mackinac, you know, could you hit high-speed chargers all the way with enough frequency? And so we actually have worked with different communities to say, okay, let's be strategic about where we're helping put high-speed chargers. And again, with the rebates, we have pretty significant rebates. In some cases, I'm told it's up to like 50% of the project to put in chargers. And so we've been very involved on that end as well, helping build out the network of chargers all over the state of Michigan. And then finally, clean air. So this is one of the renewable programs that anyone can participate in is, you know, clean air. So you can choose to be a part of this program. You can choose to purchase like offsets, credits. We do this with big businesses now, and we're seeing a lot more interest from big businesses, big employers wanting to be part of programs like what we call our large customer energy renewable energy program, where they're signing up to say, we want to purchase our energy from renewable sources. And obviously, the more of that we get, that kind of helps us, you know, make that case and helps us with those build outs in the future as we continue to build more and more renewable energy projects. We're also seeing battery storage. You'll see us investing in that. You know, we have, again, we're a large landowner. We have a lot of sites. And so we have areas where we could locate batteries. The interesting thing, when you think about our energy use, is that each day it has peaks and valleys, right? In the middle of the day, the hottest part of the day, everybody's running their air conditioners, there's a giant peak. And then at night, there's a valley and there's a lot less demand. So when we have more generation than what we need at certain times of the day, which lends itself really well to batteries, right? When you have excess generation capacity, you can charge those batteries. And then during the times of the day, those peak, as we call it, peak times, you can use the batteries as peaking utility to help you kind of shave off that peak when you need it. So you will see a lot more investment in batteries as well. And then the other one, I was just in a conversation yesterday about renewable natural gas. And you will also see an increase in renewable natural gas. So this is like large farms that have biodigesters and those sorts of capture technology. You'll see that become much more prevalent as well over the years. And there are many forms. I can't rattle them all off. There's like 7 forms of renewable natural gas or something like that. So you'll see more of that coming as well. Yeah, I think I hope that covers everything. And I guess I can just go to Q&A and see if there's any thoughts or questions that folks have.
Steve, I see your hand is up.
Great. Of course, I'm going to ask Derek to share his screen again, but
Oh, sure.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
One is a simple question. How many coal-fired power plants still remain? You said they're going to be closed by 2030, or no, 2025.
Right.
How many are there left?
I want to say there are 5 left.
Okay. Can we go back to that slide of the graph, the transition
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Oops. We lost it.
There we go.
Here we go. So I'm looking at what you're calling energy storage. That's essentially constant to 2040. Is that mostly the Ludington plant?
It's primarily Ludington, and then again, you'll see some batteries start to come online as well.
Oh, okay, but Ludington now essentially is storing 10% of your capacity.
Right, it's generating basically about that. Yep.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure how that calculation works, but because you have to generate the power to pump the water up anyhow, or is the power required to pump the water so insignificant that that you consider that the storage as net generation?
Yeah, there is a net generation because what we're doing, again, when we talk about those peaks and valleys, we're pumping it at night when the rate is cheaper, and then we're discharging it during the day. I mean, when we're getting a higher rate for that energy, basically. If that makes sense.
Right, but if you generate, I mean, if it requires, say, 10 megawatts to pump the water up, and you get 20 megawatts of storage, you have net 10 megawatts. And I guess if I can, Nikki, just my last question is, what is all of the nuclear capacity in your generation area going away by 2025?
Right now, yes. So Palisades was our last nuclear plant that we were purchasing power from. We don't own it. We did own it at one time. And I mean, right now, they've not 100% officially announced, reopening. There may be a reopening. But then also, if there were a reopening, again, because we don't own it, there would have to be a negotiation in terms of us purchasing the power. We may purchase the power, someone else may purchase the power. So that's settled at this point. So right now in our plan, we're forecasting to not have nuclear. I'm told that technology, that there's things like small modular reactors that are on the horizon. So, I wouldn't rule it out, decade, 15 years from now, that technology will come around, and you'll start to see it. But for right now, it's not part of the plan.
And I know Crystal's got her hand up, but just real quickly, how are you doing? Are 2025 is right around the corner. Are we close to this breakdown that you're showing here?
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely moving forward in terms of the coal, the decommissioning of those plants. Yeah, that's all on track. I've not heard of any change to that plan. The solar, we're trying to build it as fast as we can. I'll tell you that the siting is a bit of a challenge. I mean, not everyone loves it. Not everyone necessarily wants it in their backyard in terms of a large scale project. And so it'll be a challenge for sure. And that's something I would say to this group, that if you are, passionate about renewable energy or solar, as these things come up in your community, I would hope that people would speak up and say, yes, we like the idea of solar, we like the idea of renewable energy, because we've certainly seen groups who are just sort of professional anti-solar, sort of following us around as we develop projects throughout the state. And so it's always good to hear from other voices as well.
Great, thanks. I'll
Yep.
shut up now.
Okay, Crystal, you are next.
Hi, yeah, going back to the pumped hydro in Ludington, as I understand it, that is mostly a cost-saving measure. You're pumping it at night when it's lower and then releasing it in the day to save costs. Is there any plans to maybe eventually switching that where you're using renewable energy during the day to pump it and then releasing it at night, so that it's like a battery, basically. You're pumping it when there's renewable energy and releasing it when there's none?
Yeah. So yes, I wouldn't say there's a concrete plan, but I've definitely heard of us talking about and considering, when we are pumping it, could we be pumping it from using a renewable source? Like, for instance, could we add solar somewhere to that site that would be significant enough that it could handle the pumping? Then that entire site would be truly, a completely renewable type of asset. Yes, that is definitely something that has been discussed.
Okay.
I can't tell you where it's at in terms of, coming to fruition, but
It's basically probably as the prices change, you would do it at the cheapest point. And so once you have more renewable, that would become the cheap time to do it, would be during the day. It's sort of like me charging my car. Sometimes I do it during the day when the sun's bright. Mark?
Hi, Derek, I've spoken with you before, Mark Miller, Kalamazoo Township.
yes.
Just a quick question. I wasn't able to get on at the beginning. Are you the person who local governments should be talking with?
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, and I know we've talked in the past. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Susan, you're next.
Yes, thank you,
Mark,
Derek.
put your hand down, so yeah.
Thank you, Derek. Yes, I'm wondering how consumers is coping with the resistance to solar farms. I know that some farmers are opposing it, although in other places farmers support it. And are you working with some of the supportive farmers to help cope with the resistance from these groups that are opposing the solar farms?
Yes, yeah. So it's a mixed bag. I mean, that truly, and we work with the Farm Bureau, we're members. We have a person on our team who's the liaison for the Farm Bureau. And it's a mix. There are some who say, don't take good land. There are some who say, I have some land over here that's not as productive and I'd love to see it being solar. We're seeing a lot of generational, like, farmers who say, I've farmed for 50 years. My kids don't want to do it. I don't really, I don't want to be in the business anymore. Solar is a pretty sure bet for them, right? We're going to lease the land. We're going to give them a check every month. And so there are, we're finding quite a lot of farmers who want to work with us as well. So it's a mix. And I always like to throw this out there because we get a lot of that, you're taking prime farmland. When you look at solar at the state level, if you look at it nationally, the amount of solar that we need to meet all of our demands is really a very small percentage. It's the Michigan Farm Bureau on their website says there are 10 million tillable acres in the state of Michigan. And if you remember earlier, I said we need about 80,000 acres consumers to meet all of our goals. So that's a very small percentage. So that's something that we try to get out there as well. Yeah, I don't know if anyone's followed the state of Michigan or the governor. She made an announcement last week. She has a package of bills this fall that she's looking at for renewable energy. Some of it takes away some local control, which we are not big fans of. We would like to see the locals at the table. But also in the budget, there was some money that it was kind of an incentive for communities. It was called Renewable Ready Communities. And the idea was if a community is interested in doing it, it would help kind of give them some money for planning and maybe other things that they could do for their township. And that seems like a good approach to us as well, to kind of help incentivize communities. So.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, Tim?
Just to follow up on Susan's comment, there is definitely organized concern amongst climate activists about this resistance to developing solar in particular. And for example, there was a presentation at the Michigan Climate Action Network Summit by those people, and they have websites that provide rebuttals to the false claims made by the opponents of solar energy. So we will continue to promote those that information to help out since we're very concerned.
That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, there truly are groups that are professional. Many of them maybe not even based in the state of Michigan. And when we have a project, they show up at those local meetings and they are very opposed to any sort of renewable energy. Mostly it's political, you know? And so, yeah, it's very good to have voices that are saying, yeah, we want this and it can work in our community.
Okay. Steve, you got another question?
Yeah, Derek, I'm sure you're aware of, there's a bunch of renewable energy bills working their way through the Michigan legislature. One of which relates to community solar, which is, you know, smaller than your 100 megawatt targets, but potentially could in the long run contribute quite a bit if people were able to participate. I'm wondering what your viewpoint on community solar is.
We support that as well. Our program right now is currently close to subscribed, but it wouldn't shock me to see that cap raised at some point so that there would be more of that. But definitely we've been approached by, you know, local governments that want to offset some of their use as well. And so people have, you know, it's harder when you get to you know, urban type areas because they just don't have the land necessarily, but in some cases they have brownfields and other large pieces of land that potentially could work for sort of smaller scale. And we're definitely in conversations in multiple places on that as well. So, I mean, we definitely, it's kind of in two buckets, if you will. There's that large scale, but then there is also a community scale as well that we're working on in several. So Western Michigan is a prime example of one of those community scale type projects. That one's 1 megawatt. And, you know, you probably will see more of those as well.
Okay. Tim, do you have another question? Or is your hand still up?
I have another question.
Okay.
It's widely recognized now with the development of numerous new renewable energy projects around the country that there's a challenge connecting these projects to the grid. And this has become a major focus of an organization I work with called the Citizens Climate Lobby, who has detailed several bills have been introduced into the National Congress to address this concern about permitting reform for transmission lines for renewable energy. Does consumers lobby Congress? Is this a concern of consumers? And do you participate in lobbying Congress to bring about these reforms?
Yeah, we do have a federal government affairs team in Washington. That's not one that I'm aware of. I could ask and get back to you all on that particular piece. But we definitely have a team there. And I can tell you, the interconnection to the grid is one of the big costs in each of these projects. And so I know that that's another reason when we look at building at large scale, is that the interconnection cost kind of stays the same whether you build 10 megawatts or 100 megawatts. And so it makes more sense to build the large projects if you can. And then I don't know if you caught it at the beginning. I know a few folks came on a little bit later, but as we're looking at sites, we look at our current high voltage network, and we are looking at sites that are within a couple miles of our current high voltage, because it adds a significant cost if you also have to build 10 miles of new high voltage lines for the project. So we're already trying to site them as close as possible to our current facilities.
Okay, organizations that I'm aware of in the state, and a representative of one of those was on the call but has apparently logged off now, are heavily criticizing consumers because of a claimed record of poor repairs of damages and excessive prices and pursuing profits over service to customers and so on. Do you have any response to these kinds of criticisms?
I'm not sure specifically what you mean in terms of damage, but I can say in terms of rates and in terms of reliability, that is a huge focus for us right now. We recognize that we have to do something about rates. We have to keep rates competitive. We're on a large internal mission right now to do that. And also on reliability. We have a plan right now. We're in, I want to say, a year or two into it. It was a $5 billion reliability plan. We've spent more on tree trimming in the past couple of years than we ever have, and more on building out and modernizing the grid as well, adding new technology. And yeah, that is a huge focus for us right now. Besides our generation piece and the renewable or the clean energy plan, I would say that's probably the other biggest company focus right now is on rates and reliability. But I'm not sure what you meant in terms of damage.
I just meant repairing damage from storms and so on.
Yeah.
Which is what you're talking about.
Yeah. And storms, it's been, this year we've had 2 really large storms, and storms are very expensive. The ice storm was one of our biggest storms that we've ever had, that back in the spring. And then we just had one a week ago or so, 2 weeks ago. That was another large storm.
Marianne, I'd leave that screen up there for a while yet, okay? Okay, so I had a couple of questions. One is, you've eliminated net metering for new customers at this point for about a year already. So what is the rationale for having a cap? Since everybody who puts up solar panels on their houses helps to reduce the draw from the quote factories, where you make it. Why have a cap to the number of individuals who can now do that?
It's really a lot of it, and I always get the numbers wrong if I try to throw them all out there, but a lot of it comes down to cost and what we can purchase solar for on the open market versus the agreed upon purchase price that we purchase it from local individual. Like, so if you put solar on your roof and you were part of our distributed generation net metering program, we pay you, I think it's roughly around 3 times what we just pay on the open market to purchase.
I thought now you were paying straight wholesale price to new customers.
Again, I can check that. That could be, yeah, I'd have to check on that. But that was my understanding of the cap, was just price, basically.
Oh, yeah, I understand it when it was the net metering, but as I said, I thought that now what you were paying just straight wholesale. Another question I had is when you show your renewables going up every year, what percentage of that is wind? Do you purchase wind from the northern wind farms, or when they put it into the lake to supplement the solar that you're building?
We have, I think, 3 or 4 projects now that we own that are wind farms. There's one right next to Ludington. There's one over in the Thumb. There's one now in Hillsdale. So we will continue. That will be a piece of that 60%. Again, the majority of it will be solar, but there will still be increased wind, and it will be the same as the solar. There will be a portion of that we will purchase from private wind companies as well.
But wind is definitely part of that mix, because that gets me to my third question, which is always one that I've never felt I've gotten a satisfactory answer for. On my solar panels during the summer, I can get 400 kilowatt hours a month. In winter, I get 100 kilowatt hours. With solar farms, when you're putting them up, how do you account for that fluctuation in the solar production? And the storage isn't necessarily the answer, because in winter you're not even getting it to store. So how with the solar farms are you accounting for that?
Yeah, so that we have an equation, right? That's like a net sort of capacity equation that we figure out on every project, where we sort of take the whole year and we assume a percentage of the nameplate, right? If it says it's going to generate 100 megawatts, we're assuming a percentage each year that is going to be kind of the actual generation. And then that goes into our equation when we look at the total build price, and what we can deliver a megawatt for out of that project. I'd have to have one of our engineers here to explain all the math, but that's basically, yes, they do take that into account. And so they know they're not getting that 100 megawatt nameplate generation every single day. They're getting a percentage based on time of year. The other thing I'll say is the peaks and valleys each day of energy use, it's also like that throughout the year. In the summer, we need about twice the generation that we do in the winter, right? Air conditioning is the biggest peak that we have. And so in the winter, yes, solar is not as productive. Also happens to be when we need the least amount of energy generation. In the summer, when solar is most productive, happens to be when we need the most production. So
what happens when we get rid of natural gas? The natural gas is going down on your chart all the time. And natural gas is what we use in winter for the most part, for the furnaces and for the hot water heaters still. So as we electrify everything, we reduce the amount of natural gas to the point where it even went down to 0 in your chart. That means that the solar and the renewables are taking it over. But if the solar isn't that strong in winter, what is going to be the renewable?
So the chart, I want to be clear, that is only generation sources. So that is, we're using natural gas to generate energy right now, right? We own natural gas plants. In the future, we don't think that we'll own natural gas plants, but there will still be a natural gas distribution network. We're still planning on that right now. So in terms of distributing natural gas to homes and businesses, that's not eliminated as part of that plan. There's just using it as a generation source.
Well, you said at the last on your, I don't know what the year was, 2050 or whatever, maybe 2070, it was only 10% natural gas. And it was 60% renewables. And so, this is a question I have, because solar is great. I love solar, but it's not consistent. And we need consistency in the total, wiring and what we use. So that's always been one of my biggest questions in my mind. I've never, and I still don't feel satisfied with your answers, because it's not explaining how in winter, when I get 1/4 of the solar that I get in summer, it's still going to take care of my needs when I'm not using natural gas to be heating my house, to be running anything.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I'm saying it's about 50% figure less energy that you typically would need right now, okay, with natural gas. And I understand what you're saying about electrification, and we are seeing more of it, but right now our plan assumes, we don't assume complete electrification in terms of energy sources for customers. We're not assuming that natural gas will be eliminated completely in terms of distribution. So the mix could change if we see a big movement to do that, but it'll have its place and its applications, certainly to go all electric, but we're not planning on it, completely across our grid right now.
Okay. Yeah. Steve, you have a question.
Yeah, I think this is going to be sort of a more nebulous question. I'm assuming, Derek, that at least most of your company is not burying their head in the sand, and they understand the risks of climate change, and that the ice storm that we experienced this winter is not a once in 100-year kind of occurrence, that the chances of storms like that, of damaging storms, is going to increase as the impacts of global warming on climate sort of continue to increase. I guess my question is, what is consumers doing on a company level to communicate that, to educate people, and to advocate for common sense resilience to adapt to the likelihood that we'll have another ice storm like last winter, this coming winter? Or is there a committee or a department or a program within consumers to educate people about the real risks?
Yeah, so I mean, first off, we completely acknowledge and have said, in the past, I know our leaders have said, yeah, we acknowledge climate change, and we acknowledge that some of these storms seem to be getting worse and seem to be getting more damaging. And I can say from our standpoint, we are pushing for that is our, reliability investment that we're making. At the end of the day, our customers when they turn on the light switch, they want the light switch to come on, you know, and so we have to figure out how to, you know, build in as much investment in reliability as we can, with the knowledge that, yeah, potentially these storms could be getting worse, and we should budget that there are going to be storms. We have to prepare ourselves for those and try to make our grid more resilient. You know, yeah, because that's what our customers, you know, they expect us to have, you know, world-class reliability. And that's what we're trying to deliver. So, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Derek. And thank you very much for coming and doing this today.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you.